Hi, I'm Rasheed, Ogunlaru, coach, speaker, author. Delighted to be here with my very good friend, very accomplished coach, Rita Bailey. Coach to senior managers, large organisations. You've worked across the public sector. You've worked with big brands, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Microsoft. Lots of the time working with managers, senior managers, often at a time of change. And we're having this conversation right now at a time for change. It just so happens we're moving from summer into autumn. Lots of people are going back to work. But one of the things that happens at this time of the year, or any times of the year, is when people feel stuck. We were just saying stuck, stilted, or stagnant in some way in their career, or stale in their career. And I want to talk a little bit about that and what people can do. I guess also it's exacerbated by the fact that over the last few years the economy has been quite difficult across sectors: private, charity, public sector, downsizing, international competition, and so on. So people are often far more nervous, even though there are some signs that things are going to change. But coming back to the central thing about people feeling stuck, tell me a little bit about what are some of the reasons why you can feel stuck. And I guess one of the things worth saying is that you can feel stuck. Anybody can feel stuck.
Well, you can feel it at any time of the year, as you actually said. But yes, there are certain situations that can be an impetus for people who want to actually change.
Right.
So, for example, redundancy. Redundancy is the obvious one. The organisations go through restructuring as well. There are lots of changes going on within the organisation as well. So that can bring issues of anxiety. Is it time for me to move on? Is it time for me to change? What does this change actually mean for me? So I think that's definitely one of the reasons. But I also have to say to you, sometimes that doesn't have to be the reason why people actually want to move on. They just from personal circumstances. Sometimes you've been in a role for some time, or a particular industry, and you want to change. Sometimes the industry changes itself.
And I would imagine that sometimes then this stuck feeling, I'd imagine from what you're saying, that sometimes you're consciously aware that you're feeling stuck.
Yes.
And sometimes it's unspoken. You're just feeling stuck, and you can't think, what should somebody do if they're stuck? It's either it's external or it's internal, it's the boss or it's the industry or it's the restructure, whatever it might well be.
Yes.
What are some of the first things to do if the stuck feeling is happening to you, you're feeling stuck?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's really important to reflect on the reason why you're actually feeling stuck.
Right.
Is it just kind of I want to say kind of an everyday kind of thing, you feel a bit frustrated, you feel a bit annoyed at your boss or something like that, and then you feel like that, or is it actually the feeling is from I'm not using my skills, I'm not being recognised for what I actually want to be doing. It's time for a change. I want to do some new things. So it's just kind of making sure that you understand exactly what it is that's actually going on for you. That's really important. And then the second thing also as well is just to say it's important to actually do an assessment of your skills.
Right.
So what skills have you got? What strengths have you got? What have you actually achieved? What have you actually learned as well? What I've found is that when you're in a job for a long time, you forget what you've actually done. You forget, you've not taken stock of those things that you've actually done.
I think that's such a good point. So I often recommend people produce a document of all their achievements.
Yes.
Soft, practical. I managed this, I did this, I was involved in this program. No matter where you are and anything that's really had an impact, you keep that note, which can be very useful, presumably, whether you stay or wherever it is that you go, and making sure that those things are on things like the CV as well.
And I think it's actually needed. So whether you're staying within the organisation, you're looking to move on up, or move laterally within the organisation, or to move on out of the organisation, I still think it's important to actually reflect on your skills and think about what your achievements are, because you're going to need to use that to show how you will contribute to the next role.
Right. And one of the things that you were saying when we were chatting earlier is then the importance of asking yourself, what is that actually I want? I guess this ties in with what you talked about.
Absolutely.
What is it I actually want? Do I want to stay here? Do I want to move on? Do I want to work part-time? Do I want to move into a new industry? And so on. And you also touched on what's that journey going to involve. So once somebody's done this, first of all, the stock take, and they've listed their skills and their talents, what then, and they're beginning to ask themselves what they want.
Yes.
Are there any particular steps? I guess let's say somebody is wanting to move on up. I'm wanting more senior job right now. I feel as I've been in this job for 5 years, 3 years, and I'm wanting now to become a manager or whatever. If somebody's wanting to move on up, what are some of the things that they should be making sure that they do?
Okay, well, certainly one of the things that I always recommend to people is to make sure that you really do know your business. So the organisation that you're in, do you know the other parts of the business? Are you well networked across the business as well? Because those people that you know across the business are also a resource to you. They're a network support to you. They can tell you about the changes and the opportunities that some of us in the business that you don't actually know about as well. So that's really important. Widen your networks, broaden your networks within the organisation that you're actually in as well. Also as well, there are people that are within the types of roles that you are aspiring to. Is it possible? Can you create the possibility of having a conversation? And usually those opportunities come up when you're at an internal network event, and you can talk to those people about their particular role and find out more about what they're actually doing.
And you made such an important point when we were chatting, just before this filming. You made the point how, for example, what are the actual skills involved in that particular role? Is it going to be about strategy? Is it going to be about management? You have those particular skills and knowing exactly what's going to be involved. So that, because you might find either you're not the right fit or your skills don't fit or it doesn't suit you.
And I think that's absolutely important. That there are, when you're moving up into a senior role, there are certain skills that are going to be required, obviously, in terms of the role and what they're actually asking for, but as well as kind of just in terms of the mindset that is required in that particular role. The kind of skills, as you mentioned, strategic skills, planning skills, negotiation skills, kind of level of presentation skills, communication to influence people as well. All these different types of skills. When you look at your strengths and your skills, have you got those skills already? If you don't, then you need to close some of those gaps.
And presumably that might be that closing the gaps, which is sometimes one of the things that people find difficult. I guess presumably you're going to need to look at a number of things. Are there internal training programs? Is it about a conversation with your manager? Is there mentoring formally or informally? Or coaching? Are there any of these things that help you close all of those different gaps? And I guess that, and is there a culture of supporting you in that? And presumably sometimes if there are and if there is, that's already in place, great. But if there's not, then I always think that reiterates it's your responsibility, it's my responsibility to make sure that I go off and get those skills.
To actually get those skills. And again, talk to different people, find out what people have done to actually close some of those gaps. It doesn't always mean that you've got to go through a formal learning process. There's an informal learning, that you can do. You can read, you can talk to people, there are short-term opportunities you can do. There are, you can take on projects.
I like when you say that before, which again is a good way to do.
Volunteer as well, for whether internally or externally. It's like get creative about the role that you're looking at. What can I do?
Well, you made a wonderful example when we were chatting again before. You made this point that, for example, let's say you're in a management thing, it might be charities and all sorts of people looking for non-executive people like that, and then you can suddenly come back.
Volunteering, becoming a trustee. Charities are always looking for good people with your sorts of skills. Can you contribute to
Well, it's really interesting, even as you say that, I realised that one of the most things that added to my skill set was that when an organisation like volunteered, I ended up being a co-director of that. What that did for my CV, where I may not have got that in the mainstream bit of my career, was really huge.
And it counts as well, because you can put that on your CV, you can use that as an example of when you've been in a leadership position, when you've been, you've taken decisions in terms of, sort of budgets or finances. If you don't get exposed to that in your organisation, but you're doing that in a volunteering position, you can use that. You can mention that as evidence, as example.
I like that, and I guess there's something that you've inferred to a lot, and there's the importance of actually networking within and beyond your organisation. Before we close, I just want to touch on this thing about what happens then if you're moving on out. For some people here within the who are listening to this, you might be listening to this at home and thinking, right, that's all very well, or for me, I've decided it's not about me moving on up in this particular role or another industry or whatever, in this role or whatever, I'm wanting to move out and do something new. what are some of the things, and that could be scary, what are some of the things that you would say that you really need to think about then?
Okay, so number one is not to focus on the fear or the scary stuff, because that would totally stop you from doing what you really want to do. And I think it's still very relevant, you know, making sure that you know what is it you actually want, so that you can decide on what it is, and then you can start to put into place a plan, a strategy to actually do that.
So actually coming up with a plan.
Yeah, coming up with a plan, you know, deciding what sort of support resources do I actually need to enable me to get to where I want to go.
And that may not, in some cases, involve retraining. So, for example, in my own case, I moved from working in media and PR, and then I became a singer and performer, and then a coach. Each time I had to train and so on. And being realistic about what's that going to involve, how much cost is that going to involve, what is that, is it just need, do I have dependence, what's that going to mean? Right. And I guess that change might sometimes also be a structural change. Am I going to want a career break, I'm going to want to work part-time or that kind of stuff?
Or all sorts of reasons in terms of personally. People are making different choices about how they want to work, in what ways do they want to work. You know, people do part-time working and studying at the same time until you can move into the role that you actually want. And so it's I'm really trying to get across is to be creative about the next opportunity, whatever that opportunity is, whether it's internal or external.
Well, that's what's interesting. What strikes me here is about, let's say for the person who's moving on out, everything you said before applies. Make sure you've got the thing, make sure you've got you've got the skills, you've got the plan, you know what that journey is going to involve. And again, all the stuff you said about the network is extremely important. Maybe you know people, or you can find people who've walked that journey, walked in that particular industry before, and so on, so that it makes that journey and that process so much easier to make. I mean, again, just before we close, some people might be watching this thinking, oh, that's all very well, like Rita says some really useful stuff, but I can't do that. I feel as though I can't do that, or I've tried everything. You know, you can hear these things all the time. What's the final piece of advice for somebody who, again, they're stuck and they've heard what you've said, and they're just still feeling, in a way, stuck, or they don't know what to do?
Yeah, I mean, if you're really stuck and you feel that you can't do that taking stock on yourself, then I say, please get support to actually do that. Either get a buddy that can help you do that, or a colleague, or if you've got a good relationship with your boss, you can do that internally. If you can't do that internally, then find someone externally within your own network that can enable you to just think things through, just bounce ideas off each other. Of course, you find yourself a coach, an external coach, like ourselves, who can support you to think through and explore those kind of opportunities that will be available to you, and just kind of broaden your thinking around it. So don't stay stuck. Remember that you can step out of it, you can be proactive, and hold yourself accountable.
And presumably also, I think one of the things is also here is that thing about backing yourself and being on your own side. I think that sometimes we can be your own side. You've got to believe in yourself. And this is where the things you're saying earlier about your achievements and so on is really important.
It's really important.
Well, Rita, I want to thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we're going to have lots more of these conversations.
I'm sure we will.
If people are trying to find you, what's the best way of finding you?
The best way to find me on www.rjbconsulting.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as Rita.Bailey. I'm on Twitter at Rita J. Bailey.
I don't know if we're linked on Twitter. I need to do that. Make sure. We are. I think I need to check that. I'm going to be making sure we're linked.
Please find me. Drop me a line. Let me know where you're at, what you're doing. It'll be fantastic to hear from anyone who's seen this. And if you are feeling stuck, you're not on your own. Speak up. Let somebody know.
I think that's wonderful and I just think, as you're saying that, I'm thinking that sometimes these feelings about when you're feeling stuck can often be that precise moment where you really begin to flourish and you find what you're meant to be doing, or that you do step up, because sometimes the two things are linked. Rita, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave you to smile at the camera as I switch it all off. And thank you very much. Take care.